None of us can afford to live in Los Angeles, but this is one of the few movies that'll make you feel better about it. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jake, the Scary Story Guy, and today I am keeping a promise to you. A few weeks ago on this channel, I reviewed a movie from this year called The Invitation, and it wasn't very good, but I promised at the end of that review that I would shortly review a movie called The Invitation. It was much, much better, and here it is. This is from 2015, The Invitation. This is a ride. The 2015 iteration of The Invitation was directed by Karyn Kusama, who also directed Jennifer's Body, which was a fairly formative movie for anyone who was a teenager in the year 2009. And it stars a Tom Hardy Walmart knockoff. That's not fair. His name's Logan Marshall-Green, and he's a very good actor in his own right. It's not his fault that he looks like a police sketch of Tom Hardy. Anyway, he plays a recently divorced man who is still mourning the death of his son. His ex-wife reaches out to him, and she and her new boyfriend invite him and his new girlfriend to a dinner party at his old house where all their old friends are going to be. Which, with a setup like that, we're already in The Office territory on the spectrum of awkward dinner parties. But they accept the invitation, and we're off to the races. Now, this movie came out 7 years ago, so I am going to do some spoiler talk, but not till the end of the video, because I get the feeling that this movie really flew under the radar for most people. It had a limited release, so it really only started to pick up steam on streaming services. I saw it on Netflix. That's where it was for a long time. I think a lot of people just kind of gradually started to realize, like, this movie kicks ass. It's one of my favorite things about the internet, how movies like this can just kind of pick up steam through word of mouth. Like, it doesn't need a big cinematic release for people to kind of recognize the talent on display here and let that just kind of organically rise to the top. One thing to mention, though, is that this movie is decidedly not for everyone, but if it's for you, it is really for you. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to tell you that, like, literally nothing happens for the first 75 minutes of this movie. It's an incredibly slow burn. The first couple acts of this movie are just devoted to building tension, building this sense of unease, this like, something's wrong, but I don't quite know what. So it's largely a matter of expectation, because someone expecting like some slasher horror extravaganza is gonna hit the hour mark of this movie like, what the f***? But to expect the wrong thing from this movie would be to miss a lot of the most subtle and engaging aspects of it, in my view. It's easy to put characters in a situation that's like very clearly dangerous. Like, oh man, that violent criminal, he's got a knife, you know, fight or flight time. But what's harder, I think, is to raise a viewer's hackles, right? They haven't run away yet, but they're alert because something's like off. To put someone in a situation where they think something bad is going on, but because of propriety or social convention, they can't lose their shit, they can't make a scene, they've just got to continue to act like nothing's wrong. That's a tricky balance to thread well, because if you give the character too few reasons to be uneasy, the audience is bored. But if you give the character too many reasons to be uneasy, then the audience is just like, dude, run! What are you doing? In conjunction with that, this movie does a really good job of highlighting something that I think often gets overlooked, which is how uncomfortable genuine displays of emotion can make other people in a public setting. Like, if someone is a little too free sharing about their grief, or if someone doesn't do a good enough job hiding their anger in public, a normal situation can instantly just become socially excruciating. It's like there's this unspoken expectation that propriety is only possible on the surface level. Like, get too deep with people in a crowd, or do or say something that's just not quite lighthearted enough, and everyone's instantly like... And that dynamic, I think, comes into play here in some very interesting ways. What else without spoiling things? Okay, the performances in this movie are really solid throughout. We've got this dude from The Haunting of Hill House who's kind of got this like too polished vibe going on, which is another thing. Like, we get uncomfortable if someone's not emotionally regulated enough, but we also get uncomfortable if someone feels like too put together. We've got John Carroll Lynch, who the second this guy ever shows up in a movie, everyone's just gotta be like, oh god, is he ever anything but a complete fucking nightmare? Like, I honestly don't know how I would react if I met this guy in person. I imagine random people just give him like a wide berth in public constantly. And the script writing, I think, fits this movie really well. It's in this weird uncanny valley of like, do people talk like that? Like, do people act like that? Which I think is exactly what you want from a movie like this, because it really adds to that unsettled flavor it's got going on. Anyway, the 2015 edition of The Invitation is a great time. Highly recommend you check it out. I'm going to give this movie 4 stars out of 5. Now for a bit of spoiler talk. If you have not seen this movie yet, stop what you're doing right now. Go find the nearest Bible and read Job 38:11. Little Da Vinci Code reference for you. Okay, spoiler time. Am I crazy? Or does this movie have the coolest final shot from any horror film, like, ever? I truly feel like this movie gains a whole star just in the last 5 seconds because it elevates the scope of the whole film so effectively. In the snap of a finger, this is no longer just a movie about a fairly domestic cult murder at a dinner party, because the final shot reveals that this is actually a pretty wide-scale tragedy, more on the Jonestown side of the spectrum. It's such an awesome reveal too, because the groundwork has been laid like the entire time, just in some pretty subtle ways. You've got the reference to how lots of rich people in the valley are into all these weird, you know, gurus and self-help practices. You've got a couple shots of all the nice houses on the hillside. Hope nothing bad happens there. And then you've got that dude hanging the red lantern outside, which you see and you're like, that's ominous. But then shit goes off the rails so quickly and completely that you forget all about that. It's just really effective, and I wanted to sing my praises here at the end of this video because it's honestly one of the freshest, most holy shit endings I have ever seen. It's also cool because the entire movie they're making these cult references. Everyone's like, what are you guys in some kind of weird cult? Which is exactly what people would say.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love and...
Yeah, this is it.
And it gets brought up so many times that it almost works as a misdirection. Like, you're like, okay, this is so obviously a cult. There's got to be something else going on here. But then, no, that's exactly what it is. And people might be like, oh, that's too predictable. But I actually thought that its seeming predictability made it unpredictable. Like, kind of like an Agatha Christie murder mystery where the killer is exactly who she's been leading you to believe it is the entire time. If that makes any sense at all, I don't know. Anyway, guys, that about does it. I've still got a lot more horror content coming this October, but if that's not enough, you can feel free to check out my original scary stories in the description below. I'll also link to my recent appearance on the Jack of No Trades podcast, making a Halloween movie guide. And in the meantime, thank you for watching my video, and here's hoping you survive to see the next one.